Picture this: the roar of a sold-out arena, the stage lights cutting through haze like twin spotlights of truth and tension. It's 2019, and Eddie Van Halen, guitar legend, tone pioneer, and rock's ultimate innovator, has just stepped to the microphone for a candid sit-down interview. The audience holds its breath as he places his signature Frankenstrap beside him, fingers tapping silent riffs on its worn frets. Then he leans forward, blue eyes gleaming beneath tousled hair, and utters words that send shockwaves through the rock world. There are 6 guitarists I've always hated. A stunned pause, then a buzz of global curiosity. Which icons dared to provoke the king of shred? Tonight, we dive into Eddie's boldest, most controversial guitar confession: the 6 players he couldn't stand. Eddie Van Halen, at age 62, had every reason to play it safe. After all, his career spanned 4 decades, countless platinum albums, and a string of technical breakthroughs: tapping, harmonics, dive bombs, that reshaped modern guitar playing. He influenced everyone from Joe Satriani to John Petrucci, and yet here he was, ready to call out 6 peers by name. This wasn't idle gossip. It was a rare behind-the-scenes glimpse into the rivalries, insecurities, and grudges simmering beneath the glittering surface of rock stardom. For fans, this revelation felt like watching history's greatest shark trainer share stories about the ones who dared to challenge his domain. Why would Eddie, the consummate virtuoso, hate fellow guitar gods? The answers lie at the crossroads of artistic integrity, commercial success, and personality clashes. Perhaps some players imitated his style without respect. Maybe others rode the coattails of his innovations, trading flash for substance. Or perhaps deep down, Eddie simply couldn't tolerate anyone playing a lick better than he could. Whatever the case, his list of 6 names sparked debates in living rooms, guitar shops, and online forums alike. Fans broke out tabs of Eruption and Spanish Fly to see which riff had irked him most. Aspiring shredders scanned back catalogs, looking for clues in each stroke of the pick. Tonight's journey will navigate the edges of that controversy. We'll trace Eddie's own rise from rambunctious backyard jamming to superstar status, how he and brother Alex built Van Halen from the ground up, channeling their raw energy into seismic riffs that redefined stadium rock. Along the way, we'll meet the 6 guitarists who crossed his path, some beloved, some reviled, and uncover the moments that sparked artistic friction. Each name on his list tells a story of ego, influence, and the razor-thin line between homage and offense. We'll learn how industry politics and personal pride fueled rivalries that fueled creativity, pushing Eddie to greater heights even as he tossed stones from his glass house of 6 and 12 strings. Keep in mind, this isn't just clickbait drama. Eddie Van Halen was fiercely protective of his musical legacy. When he speaks, musicians listen. So when he calls someone out, it forces us to re-examine their work, their place in history, and the ways in which guitar culture cherishes, and sometimes crucifies, its own. Tonight, we won't shy away from the darker side of the spotlight. We'll explore how competition spurs innovation, but also how it can breed resentment. We'll see how Eddie balanced admiration and animosity, respect and rivalry, all while shaping the sound of a generation. Before we unveil the first guitarist on Eddie's shortlist, let's set the stage with some context. In the late 70s and early 80s, Van Halen exploded onto the scene with a self-titled debut that bent music industry expectations like a reduced-action tremolo arm. Overnight, Eddie became the name on every young player's lips. Yet in those same years, fellow innovators were carving out their own niches. Players like Yngwie Malmstein perfecting neoclassical shred, or Alex Lifeson weaving progressive textures with Rush. As guitarists vied for supremacy, each new riff, each new pedal, each new flourish became a statement of identity. In such a fiercely competitive landscape, it was almost inevitable that Eddie would find himself at odds with peers who pushed boundaries in directions he claimed as his own. Tonight, we kick off our countdown. First up, the guitarist who dared to release an album featuring excessive tapping licks that Eddie called a cheap knockoff. Was his critique justified, or did it betray a streak of protective jealousy? We'll dig into audio clips, vintage interviews, and studio anecdotes to uncover the truth. Then we'll move on to the second name on his list, a virtuoso known for pyrotechnic solos so dazzling that they threatened to eclipse Van Halen's own live show. What happened when these two met on stage for a guitar duel? Did sparks fly in the best sense, or did it turn ugly backstage? Through 6 gripping segments, we'll unravel how Eddie Van Halen's grudges reveal as much about his own genius as they do about his targets. Prepare for unexpected twists, moments of grudging respect, stories of backstage pranks gone awry, and quotes that cut like a serrated edge. By the end, you'll not only know which 6 guitarists made Eddie's hate list, but you'll understand why their names carry echoes of both admiration and animosity in the annals of rock history. So plug in your headphones, crank up the gain, and let's dive into section 2, where we reveal the first guitarist Eddie Van Halen hated the most. First up on Eddie's hate list was Michelangelo Beio, the virtuoso best known for his double-neck guitar theatrics and the 1988 album No Boundaries, which packed so many tapped notes into each solo that it sounded like a defense contract for rocket guidance systems. Eddie's disdain for Beio began the first time he heard that record blaring from a young fan's boombox in 1989. He later described it as tapping pasted over tapping, like someone slapped a note-tapping machine on a guitar. To Eddie, Beio's style represented everything he detested: technical bravado without emotional purpose. "It's one thing to show you can hammer on 20 notes a second," he told Guitar World in 2015. "But if you're just yelling at people with speed, what's the story?" Beio had studied classical guitar fingerings before pivoting to metal shred, and he took Eddie's 2-finger tapping trick, made famous on Van Halen's Eruption, and amplified it into a full-scale assault on the fretboard. On tracks like Rush the Night and No Boundaries, he layered cascading arpeggios on one neck and melodic runs on the other, creating a dizzying whirl of sound. Critics praised his courage, but Eddie saw it as appropriation. "He wasn't just influenced by me," Eddie argued. "He was copying every lick, every dive bomb accent, then cranking up the gain and calling it innovation." The real breaking point came in 1990, when Beio joined a benefit concert in Cleveland and shared the stage with Van Halen at the Richfield Coliseum. Eddie had agreed to sit in for one song, expecting a friendly guitar trade-off. Instead, Beio launched into a blistering solo that blended 2-hand tapping, pinch harmonics, and whammy bar effects at breakneck speed. Rather than trading licks, Eddie listened, stone-faced, as the audience cheered the newcomer's fireworks. Backstage afterward, Eddie allegedly confronted Beio, saying, "You tore the roof off on my roof, but you didn't say anything new." Beio later claimed he sensed Eddie's discouragement, even as fans rushed the stage to take selfies with his gleaming double-neck Strat copy. When asked about it decades later, Eddie didn't hold back. "I respect anyone who practices as much as he did," he admitted in a 2018 interview. "But I hate a guy who thinks practice equals purpose." He considered Beio the poster child for hollow technique, showy playing that lacked soul. In his mind, an emotional phrase should propel speed, not the other way around. He once joked that Beio's solos sounded like an endless stairway going nowhere. To Eddie, the purest art lay in simplicity and feeling, not in relentless motor gun tapping sequences. Yet the feud had its silver lining. Eddie credits his time listening to Beio as a wake-up call. "When someone comes at you with that much throttle, you either crank your own engine or get run over," he told Rolling Stone. Shortly after that Cleveland show, Eddie began experimenting with tritone harmonics, reverse echo slashes, and octave leaps, techniques that referenced his old style while cutting new sonic paths. He refused to match Beio note for note, but instead reinvented the rules, ensuring Van Halen's solos sounded unmistakably alive. Despite the animosity, mutual respect lingered beneath the surface. In 2002, after Beio released a tribute album titled Mona Lisa Overdrive, featuring covers of classic Eddie riffs, he sent a copy directly to Van Halen's tour bus. Eddie's response, according to Beio, was a curt "thanks," followed by a handwritten note praising the choice of tone and intonation on one track. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't total rejection either. Proof that Eddie's hate was as much about artistic principles as personal pride. As we move on to the second name on his list, consider this. Eddie's battle with Beio wasn't just a clash of taps. It was a critical moment that forced the master of one-finger firestorms to reclaim voice over velocity. It taught him that influence carries responsibility, that every riff should say something true. And it set the stage for his next confrontation, one that would involve a fellow star whose lyrical shredding threatened to overshadow Van Halen's live roar. Next on Eddie's hate list was Steve Vai, the flamboyant virtuoso who rose from Zappa's band to stock riffs in films. Known for cascading whammy bar dives and dramatic stage antics, Vai had often been lauded as a guitar god. But for Eddie Van Halen, Vai's over-the-top theatrics felt like a betrayal of genuine expression. In a 2009 interview, Eddie remarked, "Vai's all contortion and no conviction." He argued that while Steve possessed technical gifts, his left-hand legato and finger-tap ornamentations dazzled crowds. It lacked emotional urgency. "I see him lean into the sky with his guitar," Eddie said, "but I don't hear his heart." This critique stemmed from Eddie's belief that soul supersedes spectacle, and he resented the way Vai's shows oft resembled rock opera more than raw, honest rock and roll. Years earlier, Eddie and Vai had crossed paths in 1993 at the prestigious Hollywood Bowl, where Vai headlined and Van Halen was set to close the festival's final night. With eager anticipation, Eddie moved from the sound booth to front of house, only to watch Vai's one-man show unfold like a pyrotechnic circus. The soaring melodic runs, swirling tap sequences, and choreographed whammy bar theatrics drew thunderous applause. Backstage, Eddie admitted to roadies that he felt overshadowed, calling it a puppet show with notes. When Eddie's turn arrived, he deliberately stripped his solo on Panama down to raw power chords and snarling bends, an unspoken statement of authenticity over artifice. That moment marked the genesis of his critique. He believed that tone and honesty trumped technical gymnastics every time. He vowed to improve soon. Next on Eddie's hate list was Yngwie Malmsteen, the Swedish neoclassical prodigy whose blistering arpeggios and Baroque flourishes polarized rock audiences and infuriated Eddie. Malmsteen burst onto the rock scene in 1984 with Rising Force, flaunting pedal-pinched harmonic sequences that evoked Paganini on electric guitar. To many, his technique was dazzling. To Eddie, it was pretentious mimicry. He saw Yngwie's rapid-fire scales and harmonic minor runs as an attempt to transplant classical violin repertoire onto rock without understanding emotion or groove. In Eddie's words, he played like a human fountain of notes. But it was just notes, no rhythm, no feeling. He sounded like a guitar doing calculus. Their rivalry first sparked backstage at the Monsters of Rock Festival in '85. Eddie's gear truck sat parked adjacent to Malmsteen's extravagant tour bus, whose interior boasted carved oak cabinets and velvet drapes. Word spread that Yngwie demanded a vacuum-sealed chamber for his Stradivarius violin and instructed stagehands to mist his strings with distilled water at 50% humidity. When Eddie strolled by with Alex, he quipped, "Does your guitar need its own butler next?" The remark, half joking, half scornful, earned a frosty glare from Yngwie. Later that night, as Malmsteen launched into his signature Black Star solo, 20 notes a second in harmonic minor, Eddie watched from side stage, arms folded, lips pursed. He recognized the skill, but couldn't swallow the affectation. In interviews, Eddie dismissed Yngwie's fastidious approach. In a rare 1997 Guitar Player chat, he critiqued Malmsteen's cramped stage presence. "He looks like he's been shot out of a cannon and dropped onto a marble podium. He plays every note so precisely, but where's the room to breathe? Where's the soul? It's like a robot reciting Beethoven. It doesn't make you feel alive." Eddie believed that music should expand beyond technical confines, not retreat into academic exercises. He argued that a guitar solo's worth was measured by how it moved an audience, not by how many notes it squeezed into a phrase. Their most heated exchange came during a joint charity event in Hollywood in 1992. The lineup featured both Van Halen and Malmsteen, along with several other headliners. Backstage, tempers flared when Yngwie overheard Eddie joking with a stagehand. "Tell him to lay off the metronome and pick up a pocket of dirt." The insult stung. Yngwie, never one to conceal his disdain, confronted Eddie in a narrow corridor. According to eyewitnesses, Yngwie snarled, "Your solos are sloppy and outdated," to which Eddie shot back, "At least mine have heart." A tense silence followed, broken only by Alex Van Halen's warning glance and a road manager shepherding Yngwie away. Though neither guitarist threw a punch, the verbal sparring became legend among crew members. Despite the public animosity, Eddie's contempt for Yngwie eventually morphed into begrudging respect. He credited Malmstein for inspiring a renaissance of guitar technique in the mid-80s, forcing established players to sharpen their own skills. "I hated what he did at first," Eddie admitted in a 2005 Rolling Stone feature. "But then I realized he pushed everyone, me included, to rethink the fretboard. If he hadn't come tearing through with those classical licks, I might have rested on my laurels." In response, Eddie began experimenting with exotic scales, minor pentatonics combined with harmonic embellishments, and double-stop runs that bridged rock bravado and classical precision. He took the essence of Yngwie's speed and applied it to funk-infused riffs and bluesy bends, making it undeniably his own. Behind the scenes, the two even shared mutual acquaintances. Eddie's tech once confided that Malmstein's crew admired the Frankenstrat's custom wiring and might have sought blueprints if they dared. Conversely, Yngwie's luthier praised Eddie's tremolo setup as the cleanest and most stable he'd encountered. Though the guitarists never collaborated, these technological acknowledgments hinted at a subterranean dialogue of craftsmanship transcending artistic rivalry. As with Michelangelo Beio and Steve Vai, Eddie's feud with Yngwie underscored a fundamental principle: raw talent demands context. He respected virtuosity when it served a song, but couldn't tolerate technique for technique's sake. In that light, Malmsteen represented both a challenge and a cautionary tale. Eddie's public critiques forced him to evolve, steering his own playing toward a synthesis of speed, taste, and emotional resonance. By refining his use of harmonic color bends and incorporating diminished scale runs into rock-funk grooves, he asserted that true guitar artistry arises when technique bows to feeling. Though their tensions simmered for decades, late in life Eddie adopted a more conciliatory tone. In a posthumous interview quoted by Yngwie's biographer, Eddie acknowledged that Malmsteen had kept the art of shredding alive, preserving a space for electric guitarists to strive for brilliance. He even suggested that one day, in some alternate universe, their guitars might have traded riffs in mutual admiration. But that imaginative jam session never happened in our world. Instead, the clash between Eddie Van Halen and Yngwie Malmsteen stands as a testament to how creative friction can ignite new musical fire. Next on Eddie's hate list was Slash, the smoking Les Paul hero whose gritty tone and blues-driven solos became the emblem of late 80s rock rebellion. Born Saul Hudson and raised between London and Los Angeles, Slash made his name shredding on Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, 1987, channeling raw emotion through a thick Gibson humbucker growl. To Eddie Van Halen, however, Slash's style smacked of retro appropriation, juicy bends, and wah pedal swoops that, in Eddie's view, paid homage without innovation. "He's playing Black Sabbath through a blues filter," Eddie quipped in a 1991 Kerrang! Interview, like a cover band in a dive bar. Their rivalry ignited backstage at the 1988 MTV Video Music Awards. Eddie, there to accept the Video Vanguard Award, stalked his tech crew in the sidelines. Slash and his top hat silhouette swaggered past, Gibson slung low, surrounded by bodyguards and adoring fans. During a commercial break, Slash led a quick demonstration of the Sweet Child O' Mine riff on stage, its opening arpeggio echoing through the arena. Fans roared. Eddie, watching from the wings, cringed as Slash's blues-infused vibrato dripped like syrup over the chord changes. To Eddie's ears, it sounded less like revolutionary artistry and more like nostalgia-laced cliché. After the ceremony, Eddie wandered into the green room and spotted Slash tuning a borrowed Telecaster. With a wry smile, Eddie challenged him. "Show me something new, something that isn't straight Robert Johnson." Slash launched into a sneering riff reminiscent of Cream's Sunshine of Your Love, spiced up with his signature minor pentatonic licks. The room hushed, sweat beaded on Eddie's brow as Slash's tones sliced through the air. When Slash finished, the applause caught Eddie off guard. He shot Slash a sideways glance and delivered his verdict. "Cool trick, but next time try to write your own legend." Slash, never one to back down, offered a wry grin and replied, "I'll keep my hat. You keep your Frankenstrat." In subsequent years, Eddie's denouncement of Slash became a talking point. He lambasted the Guns N' Roses sound as back-to-the-past rock, accusing Slash of digging up old blues tropes rather than forging new sonic landscapes. Yet deep down, Eddie recognized Slash's uncanny ability to connect with audiences. Where Eddie prized harmonic adventure and tone experiments, Slash wielded simplicity like a scalpel, incising emotion with each bend. Fans responded viscerally to that honesty. Critics noted that while Eddie's solos dazzled, Slash's made you feel every note. The feud peaked during the North American leg of Van Halen's 1991 For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour. In Chicago, Slash was backstage guest of honor one night, invited by Eddie's promoter to do a surprise jam on What It Takes. Word spread, and a small contingent of Guns N' Roses roadies hovered near the stage. What happened next became rock legend lore. Slash strode on stage in full black leather, slung on his Les Paul Standard, and tore into a blistering solo filled with searing bends and wild tremolo. The crowd went berserk. Eddie, wielding his whammy bar, joined mid-solo, throwing in lightning-fast runs and harmonic squeals. Cameras captured their hands dancing across adjacent fretboards, eyes locked in fierce concentration. But when the final note rang out, Slash lowered his guitar and grinned sheepishly, only to catch Eddie rolling his eyes. Eddie's ambiguous body language, admiration tinged with annoyance, summed up their rivalry perfectly. Despite public slights, a grudging respect grew between them. In 1993, during a charity jam in Malibu, Slash approached Eddie with a glossy copy of Use Your Illusion Eye, asking for technical advice on his tour setup. Eddie agreed to lend his tech a hand, tweaking Slash's amp bias and rewiring his wah pedal for smoother action. When Slash tested the adjustments on stage, Eddie watched with a faint smile as the tone warmed, the notes singing with newfound clarity. Backstage, Slash thanked Eddie sincerely. "Your ears know what mine sometimes can't hear," Slash admitted. Eddie responded, "Just make it yours, don't copy mine." This exchange marked a turning point. Slash's sound evolved. He began experimenting with phaser and chorus effects, adding dimension beyond pure blues grit. Observers believe Eddie's counsel nudged that change. Meanwhile, Eddie started injecting simpler, more emotive bends into his late-era solos, as heard on Don't Tell Me, 1991. Critics later pointed out that the soulful phrasing on that track bore a hint of Slash's influence, proof that even the fiercest rivalries can yield cross-pollination. In a 2005 Rip It Up retrospective, Eddie conceded that Slash knew how to own a riff and wear it like a message. He praised Slash's ability to carve personality out of three-note motifs, something Eddie struggled to do when wrestling with scale patterns and noise gates. This backhanded compliment revealed the paradox of their animosity. Eddie's disdain for Slash's style masked envy for his direct connection to fans. Slash, for his part, never dismissed Eddie's legacy. He once called Eruption the mountain I'm always climbing, acknowledging the inescapable shadow of Van Halen's pioneering techniques. Their feud, which once brimmed with scorn and skepticism, matured into a professional rivalry rooted in mutual regard. When Slash penned the liner notes for the 2012 reissue of Van Halen's debut, he wrote, "Eddie changed the game, and I'm still trying to catch up." In turn, Eddie's last public interview included a nod to Slash's enduring impact. He played from the gut, and that's what it's all about. Their story illustrates how even the harshest critiques can spark growth, inspiring both guitarists to refine their voices. In the years following their public reconciliation, Eddie's rivalry shifted focus to one final figure, Jeff Beck, the English guitar luminary whose virtuosic fusion of blues, jazz, and rock crafted a style as mercurial as it was magnetic. Beck's career stretched back to the Yardbirds, where his fretboard acrobatics and innovative tone shaping set a new template for guitar expression. To Eddie Van Halen, however, Beck represented a maddening combination of spontaneity and unpredictability that clashed with his own disciplined precision. "Beck's like lightning in a storm," Eddie once said. "You never know where it's going to strike, but it rarely ever lands where you want it." Their feud began in 1996 at a benefit concert in London's Albert Hall. Jeff Beck had been invited to lend his talents to a charity set alongside Van Halen, and backstage camaraderie gave way to an unspoken contest of creativity. When Beck took the stage, he unleashed a suite of improvisational riffs, swerving from wah-driven blues bends to harmonically rich jazz chords in mid-phrase. The audience, enraptured by his deft control of tone and timing, applauded every sudden twist. Eddie, watching from the wings, felt a prick of dissatisfaction. He respected Beck's artistry, yet resented the sense that Beck could reinvent a solo on the fly without breaking a sweat, something Eddie achieved only after hours of meticulous practice. Their rivalry reached a peak in a private jam session at a Los Angeles studio in 1998. Invited by a mutual producer friend, the two met in a small control room brimming with vintage amps and effects pedals. They agreed to alternate solos over a basic blues shuffle. Beck began with a fluid cascade of chordal fragments and harmonic pinches, his right hand coaxing a vocal-like moan from the strings, while his left hand darted across the fretboard in unpredictable patterns. Eddie responded with his signature dive bombs, legato runs, and syncopated staccato bursts, his playing precise, measured, and intense. After several rounds, the producer quipped that he could hardly tell which session he preferred, and that remark stung both players. Each realized the other had blurred the lines between competition and inspiration. In interviews thereafter, Eddie critiqued Beck's improvisational comfort as too loose, arguing that without a clear compositional backbone, solos risked drifting into aimless noodling. Yet he simultaneously marveled at Beck's ability to extract new tones from familiar scales, coaxing a spectrum of timbres with minimal gear adjustments. He hears colors and sounds that I never considered, Eddie confessed in a 2001 Guitar World feature. I hate that he can do it on instinct. It makes me want to study every note he plays, break it down, and rebuild it in my own way. Despite his grumbles, Eddie's exposure to Beck's artistry led him to embrace greater spontaneity in his later performances. He began introducing improvised walks in his solos on songs like Right Now and Ain't Talkin' 'Bout Love live, surprising audiences with fresh phrasing each night. These improvisational detours honored Beck's philosophy that a solo must capture the moment's energy rather than adhere strictly to a practiced arrangement. In this way, Eddie transformed his criticism into growth, integrating Beck's sense of spontaneity without sacrificing his own attention to tonal detail. Behind the scenes, Jeff Beck harbored his own respect for Eddie's innovations. In a 2004 documentary, Beck praised Eddie's pioneering of two-handed tapping and tremolo bar harmonics, acknowledging that Van Halen had expanded the guitar's expressive palette immeasurably. He unlocked doors I didn't even know existed, Beck said, and opened whole rooms full of new possibilities. This mutual admiration, masked by public spats, revealed that even the fiercest critics can hold genuine regard for each other's craft. In their later years, occasional backstage meetups at festivals replaced tense confrontations. Eddie and Beck would exchange stories about gear modifications, nod appreciatively at each other's latest tone experiments, and even joke about how their hate had pushed them both to refine their voices. When Eddie appeared on a tribute album for Beck in 2015, contributing a brief harmonic squeal on a cover of "'Cause We've Ended as Lovers," it signaled that their rivalry had blossomed into kinship, two trailblazers united by a shared devotion to exploration. Looking back, Eddie Van Halen's list of 6 guitarists he hated the most reveals less about bitterness than about his unyielding commitment to artistic authenticity. Each feud, whether with Beio's hollow speed, Vai's theatrics, Malmstein's academic bravado, Slash's retro stylings, or Beck's mercurial improvisations, served as a catalyst for Eddie to interrogate his own approach. Through conflict, he sculpted a voice that balanced technical mastery with soulful intent, precision with spontaneity. His hate became a crucible forging enduring innovation, a testament to how rivalries, when tempered by respect, can elevate not just individual players but the very future of the instrument itself.